This is Jack Rice and Gulk Machar with John Eibner. He's the executive director of Christian Solidarity International. I guess the USA part of this, but I think all of it, right?
No, the U.S. affiliate.
Okay, the U.S. affiliate. And we're here just south of the Darfur border. I think when we think about Sudan, most people don't even understand it. Where's in the first place? And all they ever hear is Darfur, Darfur, Darfur. But there's a lot more to it than that, and that's one of the reasons you're here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Sudan is the biggest country in Africa. It's divided between Muslims and Christians and traditionalists, Arabs and black Africans. So it's a very complex country in terms of the makeup. But there has been war here for the better part of over 60 years.
I look around me, and it seems that there's a combination of wars that are going on. There's the 21-year civil war that was just resolved, sort of resolved at the end of 2005. There's also the Darfur genocide that was going on and continues to go on. How do those two overlap?
Well, for 22 years, from 1983, there was warfare in the area that we are now. Arab militias were coming in on horseback, burning villages, looting, seeing women and children as slaves. That was going on for 22 years. And just as there were negotiations that suspended those hostilities, the conflict moved 30 miles to the north of where we are in Darfur, and that is what people recognize in terms of conflict in Sudan. But it's basically a connected conflict. It's not something different. You have an Arab-dominated Muslim government in Khartoum made up of an elite, certain Arab tribes that form the elite in northern Sudan, and they want to maintain their power, and they do so by brutally crushing anyone who stands up in resistance to them.
I look at a couple of different parts of this conflict, and I'm a little confused. It seems that the North-South conflict was, to some degree, Muslim-Christian conflict. But the problem I see with Darfur is we have Muslim, oftentimes upon Muslim. You and I were talking about this a bit earlier. It seems that it's not just that. It seems that race plays a part. Again, you have the Arabs to the north, and then you have the Africans in Darfur and in the south. Is that a fundamental part of this conflict?
Yeah, there are two fundamental parts. One is a racial element or cultural, because it has less to do with, say, skin color than it has to do with your cultural orientation. So there's an Arab culture, people who speak Arabic, who associate themselves with the Arab culture, feel themselves superior. So there's a kind of widespread racism here, which has a result of justifying violence against people from another community who do not identify with the Arab community. So the North-South conflict, the racial element was very important. It is also very important in the Darfur conflict, where most of the rebel communities are black Africans. They happen to be Muslims. But the government justifies fighting against other people who are Muslim, say in Darfur, on the basis of Islamic law and tradition, whereas any group of people who rebels against the Islamic authority cease to be Muslim in the eyes of the Islamic governing power. Therefore, they can treat those Muslims as they are not Muslims. And so there's mixing of racism, racial bigotry, and religious bigotry that produces horrific results in Sudan, conflict that is genocidal in character.
We were talking about this earlier when I had a chance to sit down with President Salva Kiir in Juba, and that's this question of slavery. I'm telling you, people that I speak with in the United States all assume that it ended in 1865. And what we all obviously realize here is that it still goes on. We're meeting people over the last couple of days, and maybe even tomorrow, who are just released from slavery. There's still people by the thousands who are still enslaved. How is it that something like that is allowed to go on? And maybe I'm asking you a rhetorical question. I don't know.
Well, it goes on because the international community has basically turned a blind eye to it. No one has a strong enough interest in the slaves to intervene to stop the practice. So for 22 years, this ancient practice of slavery was revived right in the area where we are standing now, and say Arab militias would come and they would take women and children as slaves, march them off to the north. There are still tens of thousands of people from this area who are living as slaves of Arabs in the north. Moreover, in the Darfur conflict, the United Nations has documented the enslavement of women and children there. Nobody knows the figures and the extent of the problem, but it is documented that that is a part of the conflict. Slavery is a crime against humanity, according to international law. Yet it continues because the great powers of the world, the United Nations, the great economic powers, they have no interest in intervening to bring it to an end.
Christian Solidarity International is here, has been here for some years, trying to make a difference. How can you, with so much onslaught, with so much pain, with so much frustration, and trust me, the emotional side of this is not lost upon any of us who walk through camps like these.
Well, you start with one person. As a Christian, I try to look at an individual, and if I can, through CSI and the resources that are available, help that one person, it's worth doing. And of course, we are fortunately able to help more than just one person, but it still is the number of people that we can help is relatively small compared to the enormous need. Yet I believe that we are here on earth to help individuals where they are at their moment of need. But our work does go beyond that kind of first aid. We have, especially when it came to the slavery issue, played a very important role of creating awareness in the United States. And this has had an effect in U.S. politics. It helped encourage President Bush to launch in 2001 his Sudan Peace Initiative. To make a long story short, that ended up bringing about the suspension of hostilities in southern Sudan. So we work at different levels. We work on helping the individual in need. If we can save a life, if we can alleviate the suffering of an individual, that is worthy of doing in its own right. If I were in the position of the Sudanese displaced or a slave, I'd be very pleased to be helped, even if all of my problems are not immediately solved. But we also work at another level, trying to create an awareness in American public opinion and throughout the world, so that there is a political pressure, say in the United States, that our politicians have to take into account so that they act. There is no other interest that they have that would compel them to act. There's no overriding strategic interest which would compel them to act. There's no overriding economic interest that will compel them to help the women and children who are enslaved.
So the love for a mother, for a child, is just simply not enough.
It is not enough to move the great powers of the world, Washington or the European capitals or capitals in Africa. That is simply not enough. We have to show the powers of the world, especially in the United States, show Washington, the Republicans, the Democrats, that the American people care and want them to act, and it just could be that a politician is not reelected because they have failed the people of Sudan, and the American people hold them accountable.
When you have... Absolutely. Let me get one follow-up here, though. When you help the one person, do you ask if they're a Christian, if they're a Muslim, or if they have some other religion, or is that a requirement?
No, not at all. We don't ask anybody what religion they are in order to get some aid. We have just encountered yesterday a group of refugees who are in the north. They have returned here, basically been dumped here with just a few pitiful possessions, have been sleeping under trees, and we don't ask them what their religion is.